Hey guys, LevelCap here. Today we're going to be doing a tips and tricks video for Conquest in Battlefield 4. This will cover things from choosing your class, when to pick vehicles, what points to go for, and just some of the basic things I'm thinking and doing while running around at any given moment. Now I'm picking the Engineer class here with a ACWR carbine. This is just basically a go-to class that I will pick if I'm playing a vehicle-oriented Conquest large map. The ACWR is not necessarily the best long-range weapon, but it's what I pick if I'm not really sure what I'm going to be running into on any given map. And I'll be making adjustments to my kit as we progress through the map. Now initially here we're doing an infantry push onto D point. It's one of the most important points in the map because it spawns the attack helicopter, which can be absolutely devastating in the right hands. Now you'll start to notice from my engagements that the engagement distance is pretty far away. I'll be getting kills here and there, but the ACWR really isn't suited for the longer range engagements, and I'm forced to sort of rely on my SMA to try and finish up some kills. It works out better when I force my opponents to close the distance on this point, and you'll see how I do that in a little bit here, but it's not necessarily an ideal setup. It basically limits where I can engage my enemies. I have to force the engagement distance at closer range where I have the advantage versus medium to longer range where most other players are going to have the advantage. And unfortunately here I am just getting overwhelmed. I am solo by myself on the point. No hope of really retreating here to try and save myself because it's wide out in the open. No place to get away. So you just gotta take as many players as you can with you. Now I'm not really happy about being forced into the close range engagements, and Rogue Transmission for the most part is a pretty wide open map, so I decided to switch it up to the DMR for the Engineer class. But I'm not fully ready to give up my close range effectiveness, so I decided to go for the SKS just to be a little bit more flexible in close range. It's still a decent weapon at longer ranges, and I decided to actually go with the Coyote sight at the start. Now picking my spawn spot, I see we have two pieces of armor moving on to D. I spawn on the AC-130 thinking I can just jump out, but the good gun is open, so I figure I may as well try and get some artillery time in with this and see if I can do any decent damage. One of my principles in Conquest is if there's a good vehicle available that nobody's using, use it. You may as well take advantage of any sort of benefit you can give your team. Now if I felt like I was wasting my time up here and could be more effective on the ground, then I would immediately bail out, but I wanted to make sure I got a shot off on this tank. This clip here on the ground as I'm approaching the point shows just the versatility of running with something like the SKS on a big open map. I've been approaching this point kind of cautiously, trying to figure out where the shots are coming from. Finally, I find this guy up on the tower. I'm able to take him out relatively well with the SKS, although there was a lot of shots ricocheting off the rails. And then I decide to keep my distance here. Rather than just running straight into the middle of the point, I'm going to keep my distance, see this guy further away, something that the ACWR would have had a hard time taking out with. Then I see a guy on the minimap. He looks close. I think he's coming up the stairs, apparently parachuted in. Again, the SKS great for hip-firing enemies in close quarters when they startle you. And our team goes on to win this round of Conquest as we maintained excellent point control, not to mention maintained C and D control for most of the round. Now we're moving on to Dragon Pass, a very vehicle intensive map but also a bit narrow. It's a tricky map to play because it's very flat and there's not a lot of cover, which means you're going to need long range weapons. At the beginning of the round I grab a tank because if nobody is using the armor on your team you're going to lose. You better get used to using armor and at least become moderately proficient at it. You don't necessarily have to be a master tank driver, but decent to the point where you don't feel uncomfortable about taking a tank out of your deployment when your team needs it. Likewise, the scout helicopter can be one of the best weapons on the battlefield provided that you have some good teammates to back you up, but again, if it's just sitting in deployment and nobody's using it, then it's going to waste. I don't consider myself the best vehicle pilots for tanks or helicopters, but I'm proficient enough that I can be more effective using vehicles than I can with infantry in general. And I'm able to assist my armor on the ground here and help him capture this point. If you're a little afraid of testing out a scout helicopter in a ranked game, try it out in the test range. You can actually get quite good at piloting there before ever having to show off your skills in a real match. Now I'm approaching C point, which just got neutralized by the enemy team, and they killed one of my teammates on the point. I saw it on the minimap, so I know the enemy's alert and aware of our presence. So I'm expecting a bit of a fight here, take a stealthy approach and manage to get 3 kills right away. I can see a 4th guy on the minimap and I kind of botched the next engagement, get taken out, so Basically, they killed me, they killed our entire attack on this point, and they move on to other points. Now that one defeat certainly didn't sway me from C point. I can see some momentum building up. We push back towards C, and the entire enemy has gone to reinforced D point. And sometimes that is just the easiest way to take any point, is hit it when the enemy is not defending it. It might be boring, it might not be that thrilling, but honestly, the best use of your time in Conquest is capturing other points. Just remember that, even if you're killing tanks, sniping people from far away, the best possible use of your time in Conquest is capturing points, because in the long run, it gives you more tickets than the enemy. Moving on to Conquest Large Snowblind, I grab an APC at the beginning of the round. It's a mad dash. You usually want to get onto points as quickly as possible. However, I stop for an infantry that seems to have lost his way, because more infantry you have on any flag means you burn it faster. So sometimes it's worthwhile to slow down if you can get more infantry on that point. D is probably one of the most important points on this map, because it is easy to defend, hard to get rid of the enemies once they respawn, and it also spawns a hover tank, which, although isn't the best vehicle in the game, it can be a real nuisance. Not only is it hard to kill, but if you have a good gunner with you, you can wreak some real havoc. You can get infantry road kills and frankly just absorb a lot of damage. And that's one thing that you should really factor in as an armor user. There's games out there that actually reward you just for taking damage, like in MOBAs. If you're playing a tank that absorbs a lot of damage, your score at the end of the round will go up based on how much damage you've absorbed. And the same should be accounted for in Battlefield. Even if it doesn't give you points for taking shots, every rocket, every shot fired at you from another enemy vehicle is a moment that you have distracted and taken the full attention of those enemy players, while your teammates can move in and either kill them or take other points. So you're being effective even if you're not necessarily getting tons and tons and tons of kills. And always remember that a tank or a piece of armor is only as good as the infantry that support it. Try not to go solo too often with a tank unless you have a really good teammate on comms giving you backup in the gunner seat. Moving back to Paracel Storm, I've switched back up to the ACWR because I know I'm going to be doing a lot of building clearing here. I'm fighting for B point. This is a very important point because it spawns the AA tank, and there's a lot of aircraft in this map. Not to mention, the anti-aircraft tank is one of the best anti-infantry weapons in the game, and there isn't a lot of cover on Paracel Storm. It might seem like that, but the AA tank can get around quite nicely. And it spawned there, and I'm making a mad dash for it, running into infantry along the way. See a guy to my left, he sees me, starts shooting, but I run for the tank, grab it, and he realizes he is screwed. Now the enemy doesn't want to give up B without a fight, but I've got the AA tank here, and as long as my team is willing to support me well enough, notice I'm not pushing in solo. We have some infantry backing me up here. I'm going to go in and try and eradicate the enemy forces on this island. Sometimes it can take a while to get rid of them if they're hunkered into some buildings, but once you get rid of them, it means they have to cross another body of water before they can get back to you, assuming they don't jump out of a helicopter or something else. And again, it pays to be proficient in all vehicles. Getting all the unlocks for the AA tank is incredibly helpful. Active protection is a must on pretty much all pieces of armor. I recommend you upgrade your vehicles to at least have that kind of defense. And using active radar missiles on this little bird here disables it enough so that I can just finish it off with my main cannon. It's a cheap combo, a bit overpowered if you ask me, but damn is it good, and I'm going to use it if I have it. Moving the AA tank off of Bravo Island can be very effective because it keeps the jet pilots guessing. They don't really know where you're hitting them from, and by the time they figure it out, it's usually too late. Driving around one of the small islands in the center gives you a changing, target-rich environment, and it always gives you the option to switch the side of the island if you think you're overpowered with some of the forces. Here I'm going to run into a whole bunch of infantry. I engage them, and I'm going to get quite a few kills here. It's pretty much open season. They figure out what's going on pretty quickly, start shooting some rockets my direction, and I have the option to just back out, drive around the other side of the island. Now let's briefly talk about map knowledge and picking your spawns. You're going to see here I have the option to spawn on Bravo, and it's not being burned right now, and we don't see any enemies coming towards it, but the enemy does have A point, which almost guarantees that there's enemies running from A to Bravo. So I decided to spawn on Bravo in anticipation of that, and sure enough, there are plenty of enemies to engage. In fact, I basically start fighting here to try and defend Bravo point. So I anticipated the enemies to be there. I managed to hold them off long enough for my team to jump in and help me back up this point. Otherwise, they might have just capped it without a fight. So anticipating where the enemy is going to be on the metagame level is just as important as it is anticipating where they're going to be on a smaller level, a tactical level, where you're trying to figure out what building they might be in specifically. Figuring out what area of the map or what area or point they're going to push next is just as important, because if you can set yourself up for the action, not only are you going to have a lot of fun, get a lot of kills, but generally speaking, you'll also be able to set it up in a way where you can actually defend a point and help your team out. One thing that certainly sets Battlefield apart from a lot of the other shooters out there is that it focuses on strategy probably a lot more than it does on skill. If you can anticipate where your enemies are going to be, have great map knowledge, great map awareness, you're going to have a huge leg up on your enemy, and that's ultimately going to allow you to sneak up on your opponents. Battlefield is a lot more about flanking than it is very skillful firefights. Sure, it doesn't hurt to have good accuracy, good gunfight skills, but flanking your enemy to the point where they're just simply not even returning fire is a much preferable situation. When playing Conquest Large, smart gameplay is just as, if not more important than skillful gameplay. Taking advantage of whatever armor and vehicles you have at your disposal not only keeps them out of the enemy hands, but make sure that you have a good regiment of armor on the battlefield at all times. Remember some of the basic advice in this video, and I promise you will be doing better in your Conquest games. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap signing off.